Okay.
All right. We'll open up this meeting of the Yamhill County Board of Commissioners work session for July 27th of 2020. And our first order of business is a discussion of call for projects for the Mid-Willamette Valley Council of Governments and the Regional Solutions team, right? So you all have had a lot of opportunities, I'm sure, to look at the information, but we have some knowledge experts here too. How would you like to, do you want to explain kind of what we need to get, the information we need to give you that you're looking for, Abhishek?
Sure, I think so. That'd be great.
Okay, and then maybe we can do questions after that.
Yeah, so real quick, there's a history to this list, and many of you may already know what this history is, but many years ago, there was a needs and issues list that was compiled and maintained for the 3-county area. And my understanding, my education is that really started when some pretty significant funding was coming through to the area related to recovery for the logging and forestry industry after the spotted owl issue. So as this money started to become made available for economic recovery, a group through Regional Solutions came together and said, it would be really helpful to have a list of everything that we need and some information built out in that list so that we understand maybe how to prioritize, how to, as a region, support these sort of activities, which generally get better funding when there's some sort of a regional buy-in and support. That list was maintained for quite a while. As those funds started to dry out, they used that list to put in front of other funders and other funding types, like from the state. And then over time, it just kind of exhausted itself. I think the group that maintained it, they probably switched out. There was some issues with how do we prioritize this now, and it just went away. So now that we're seeing some funding come from EDA, some focus funding for economic.
The well guy called right as you were calling, so I had to take that.
Our regional solutions,
Yeah, you're on
once again, said it would be great if we had a list, right? Because we don't know what to support. We're not sure what folks are focusing on, what exciting projects might be being formulated, but we just don't know about. So let's get this list together. So they currently have a deadline of the 31st of this month to populate this list with existing known projects so that they can put it in front of their group who's submitting to EDA for supporting of funding projects. As I say that, I expect this list to stay dynamic for quite some time. I think that we'll continue to be populating this list with new projects or projects that maybe just didn't make it in first round because we didn't quite understand what we should be putting in there, because I think this list is going to eventually go in front of other funding opportunities, in front of other groups. So at this point, what I'm hoping for is to get an understanding of what you all are thinking about in terms of priority projects or infrastructure for expanding economic capacity. And then also to share with you what I'm hearing some of the individual jurisdictions are doing, or what some individual businesses are even hoping to do with some partners around some projects that have been formulating already. Partnerships are encouraged, so public-private partnerships for projects, things like that. And so to give you a little bit of understanding of what's currently on the list, I have had a chance to get updated. There's about 11 projects as of Friday on the list. They're really all throughout the region. In Yamhill County, there are 2 projects related to Willamina and a water project. We're seeing quite a few water projects from various jurisdictions land on this list. When we talk about infrastructure, people are really talking about and thinking about big things like the bypass. But we're also seeing some smaller projects. There's a few things on there like providing hand sanitation stations throughout an individual town so that just kind of the general community has access while they're shopping and going to businesses. The idea is that we're focusing on recovery. The idea is that there's some sort of relation to COVID and ultimate recovery, but these big infrastructure projects also qualify because ultimately it's about economic recovery and expanding capacity.
I guess the only other part that I would just kind of add, because thank you, Abhishek, for the overview. Regional Solutions put out this call for projects, and what's going to be interesting is I think it's going to be a lot more than what we could probably accomplish today as far as a work session, because one of the things that they're looking at is for the next 2 fiscal years, a listing of projects. And then there's also the shorter turnaround with that connection to the Economic Development Administration,
Right.
the economic response to the current pandemic and looking at economic recovery. So I think, it's almost like that we have 2 buckets of project potentially. You have the larger that's maybe not directly tied to COVID-19, and then you have an economic recovery or the economic impact that's tied to COVID-19 for projects. And, so I just wanted to throw that out there as well and just talk, with the projects that we're looking at. Because I know for the EDA CARES Act funds, Economic Development Administration CARES Act funds that are available, they're looking at must be awarded and expended no later than September 30, 2022. Again, it's a pretty long window to kind of project out, but just keep it in mind for some of the projects, or items that we're talking about.
Yeah.
So, sorry, I just wanted to throw that in as well.
No, that's great.
And then I wanted to make sure, Carrie, since we have 2 kind of lay of the lands, do you have anything you would like to add?
No, I think that sounds perfect right now.
Okay. Well then, commissioners, sounds like there's 2 we can focus on coronavirus stuff and we can focus on other projects that aren't immediately related, but.
Well, I think both related and not related for the future. I think probably the biggest thing is rural broadband, which I'm sure is the same with a lot of the other small counties. Is to use a private partner like Online Northwest, who's already done much of the engineering and everything. So we could probably implement that within a year or whatever.
Right.
So I think public broadband, rural broadband is definitely, to me, is the number 1. I guess the number 2, and I don't know if it qualifies, is especially with COVID, is funds for, we have a great transit system, but a couple of fallacies is number 1, we don't run dial-a-ride on Sundays. And there's a lot of youth people going places on Sundays. We don't use dial-a-ride on Sundays. And really, other than fixed route, we don't provide any transport on Sundays. I think for the senior citizens, especially related to COVID, I'd like to see us expand some of the services we provide, like on a Saturday or even into a Sunday. So those are the 2 that really come to mind.
Good. A question, a follow-up question. Just want to make sure. Have you talked to Cynthia about the kind of what it might look like to
We haven't
expand
talked
there?
about it yet.
Okay.
Because until you really figure it out, and my thing is
Yeah.
dial-a-ride, if we get the fundings, since we're not really changing routes, we're just adding
Sure.
dial-a-ride, she didn't seem that the impact, other than with drivers and stuff, that we could with very little impact, we could implement a dial-a-ride on a Sunday.
Okay, cool.
An alternate means of transportation, whether it be through Uber, Lyft, or something, alternate ways for our senior citizens to get transported from one place to another.
Okay. And I would want to make sure. Those are 2 really specific coronavirus related things. So that would be, both of them would be related to the EDA, and then the rural broadband would be, actually, I guess both of them would really be regional solutions and.
COVID is, I mean, rural broadband, you're talking about letting the farmers use more advanced equipment that they can get by monitoring inside their equipment.
Sure.
You're talking about telemedicine. Which is COVID. You're talking about distance learning, it's related to COVID right now, but in the future, even when COVID's over, distant learning is going to be a big, big issue. So so you're right.
Okay, great. And then Commissioner Sterrett, what do you think is an initial round?
Had a couple of questions, Abhisha, about the Willamina Project. Can you give me a little bit more information about that?
I wish that I could.
The
I
two?
apologize, I can't right now. I can't seem to pull it up
Okay,
to give you the detail about that. And I can provide some detail on some of those other projects once I can get access
Okay.
to it. That's all I know. All I was given access to was essentially the list initially, not any of the details. So I just know that it's two separate projects, and I believe they're both related to water infrastructure.
I know because Willamina's had some issues for a while, and I wondered what their other options were for funding. This has been an issue there, and wondering if there are other pots of money
Yeah.
that they either can or are in the process of accessing. And that would be good to know, because I know that these are critical infrastructure needs. They're not even, the layered on
They-
wish list.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, they're not the wish list, they're,
That's the
Right.
basic
they're the
stuff.
need list, yeah.
And
you
they,
know,
yeah,
The Willamina water is really interesting, because I think the good part about that is that it would only not be the city of Willamina. It impacts two counties, Polk County and Yandell County, since Willamina is split between the two counties. So it seems like that kind of project that would affect multiple counties, one city, but multiple counties would be a good candidate.
maybe if we had a little bit more are we going to have to make a decision today, or can we at least have,
No, yeah, that's a great question. Excuse me, Commissioner.
No.
Yes, that's a great
thank
question.
you.
So really what we're doing with this list right now, and the application itself, it's not an application,
Sure.
it's essentially a project detail request.
Yeah.
Is really just about that. It's saying, this is a project that exists in our region, here's some information about it, here's the contact person, here's approximately what we think we need in terms of cost. They're allowing you to put in a range. This is just to build the initial understanding. This is not actually an application to the Economic Development Fund program. This is not an application to the state. This is also not even, this conversation is not about prioritizing at this point either. So this is just about building the list. There will be future conversations for prioritization, for building out full applications. So this is very preliminary, and it's one of those rare moments where we have a chance to say, these are all the things we care about. Let's put them on a list, and then our future step is to prioritize and flesh them out.
So as far as the 7/31 deadline, what needs to be on that? Just a list?
Everything that we can think of
Okay,
that is formulated well enough to have an understanding of the impact, who the partners are, roundabout cost, and put it on the list. That's the 7/31 deadline.
Okay.
Yeah, which sounds a little bit, just kind of wild and open, but it is that
And it
process.
basically is. And
That's
and that
fine.
was some of the
That's-
struggles
that's good to know.
that was some of the struggles that we had with even, with this discussion, because if you look at the solicitation and what they opened, I mean, it's open from feasibility studies to actual capital projects, and it can range from housing to workforce development to infrastructure, broadband, rail, other capital improvement projects. So,
Yeah.
I mean, it's pretty open. I mean, this could be as far ranging as, I would see like phase 2 of the bypass, or, or a laundry list of projects. If there's a specific public works project that we think we may want to have on this category, because it could, it's a contract, you're bringing more people to work. It's and so that's why it's really open. And one of the struggles that we had, because it's not like we have in my office, a shelf where we have all these projects that are pending. It's like, we'll just take this off the shelf and put it into the queue.
Right.
So.
That's a great point. And we have other partners like the Council of Government working directly with our individual jurisdictions to try to make sure that their projects get populated. So really this conversation is about what at a county level, do you know about, care about, thinking about that might not get populated by individual jurisdictions
Right.
to make sure it's a full list for our county.
So the Willamina project would already be addressed and is being addressed at COG?
It's on there. It's in the list.
Oh, okay.
So the COG is a part of the regional solutions team, and their work that they do with the individual jurisdictions is to say, hey, this list is happening. What projects do you have? Let's get them on there.
Yeah.
Obviously, they partner to provide support for, city development and planning, so they're aware of a lot of projects. But again, that's at the individual jurisdiction level. So once we have that full list, I'll make sure that you're able to have access and can see it and understand what's on there to the best of my ability. I believe that'll be open. So that you can say, gosh, these are things we really care about as a county, and moving forward, if they get put in front of funding, we want to support it.
Right.
But again, hopefully this conversation is to say, what do you know about that maybe just doesn't get on the list that we care and want on the list?
Right.
And just start there, just
Do you?
the ambiguous list.
I wonder, the Newberg workforce housing project, is that going to be
Yeah.
on the list, or?
So Carrie and I did meet, was it yesterday? It feels like a week ago. Okay, and talked. So that
It wasn't on
yesterday.
Sunday.
It was work
That's Sunday.
yesterday.
Good.
And talked about a few of the projects that we're aware of, that we know we would like to see get on the list. So we're either working
Yeah.
with each other or other partners. But one of them is we have formed a workforce housing consortium in Newburgh. And it's a public-private partnership. We have a lot of really good engagement. We also have, the school district participates in that, and we're looking to put together a project for workforce housing development that also includes on-site childcare. So we have a template from a previous application out of the city of Newburgh several years ago that we could use as a project to put on this list and ask for funding. But our funding is, it could be as broad as to say, well, we might need 500,000 to 6 million.
Yeah.
Here's our range of what we think we might need, not having a full project actually, through an architecture phase. We don't know. But this group exists, the need is known. We want to put together a project. So we do plan on submitting a project, and actually Jody Christensen, being aware of that group and sitting on it, asked us to submit a project like that.
I have another question. So, we're in the initial phases, or actually, I guess you could say the completion phases of the relief nursery in Willamina. And we have a modular unit that we'll be placing there. We've had some issues trying to get up to speed. We had some code issues regarding water and the fire department and the city of Willamina. So we're trying to work through those. But I know that there have been some blips as a result of that and the cost associated with that. So we've had county money, $100,000 given to the relief nursery, and Lutheran's been working on this, and we have just a bunch of different cobbled together funds. And we've been kind of struggling with the end phase to get everything completely done. We wanted to open in the fall. And especially with COVID, we've got a lot of kids who are going to be suffering from some severe abuse and neglect. These are the population of kids we're looking to serve. So I'm wondering if that would be a project we could at least just ask for some funding to get us up to where we need to be to open regarding the water issue in Willamina.
Yeah, it sounds like it could very well be. We're seeing projects ranging from somewhere near, $40,000 to $10 million hitting this list. And that seems to hit, right? People, that's a needed service.
And I
Right.
think, Commissioner, being that is, say, the county gave 100,000, and we're trying to use the word cobbling together other funding sources. That would seem to me to be an ideal project, because what we're hunting for is money to push over the top to finish it.
Right.
And there's already been some funds committed to it. So that seems like that would be a pretty good application, I think, and pretty good to put on the list.
So what would you need from me is it a dollar figure or just a description of where we're at and what we need at this point?
So the way I see this working, and I am open to input on
Yeah.
this, is that as we have this conversation, Carrie and I collect the list and an understanding of maybe who our point person is.
Okay.
And then Carrie probably, and or myself, would then connect with you individually and walk through the population of this,
With the form.
this form. So to say, okay, this relief nursery project out of Willamina, this is Commissioner Sterrett's project, if you will, at least she has the information. So Carrie would reach out to you and say, okay, let's walk through this real quick and get it populated. So she could, it's a very simple form. Basically, it's asking, if you haven't seen it, the name of the sponsor. And that's why this conversation is important is because somebody needs to be saying, this is a project we care about. So as the county, you would sponsor it. Not saying financially or anything else, just sponsor putting it on the list. The name of the project, who the contact person is, a 2 to 3 sentence description, a little information about what the project will accomplish. They want to know in regards to jobs, whether it will create or retain jobs, both or neither. If there's a regional benefit, so back to Commissioner Olson's point about crossing county lines, is there more of a regional benefit to this, or maybe potentially, if it serves people, that's a regional impact. A little bit about whether or not or how it's addressing COVID-19 impacts. If there's any partner collaboration or efforts, Commissioner Sarah, to your point about joint funding, what the timeline is, the essential cost, if there's matching funds, and how much you're asking for to fund it, whether state is involved, whether it's in an opportunity zone. And then there's a local priority ranking, and that's something we can finish later. So like if you all already had a project list that from the county perspective had a priority ranking, I would say we would populate that. But at this point, since it's more of a regional question, I don't see us populating that. So it's simple, but also it takes a little thought if we need to put something in here, but that's how I see that working.
Yeah.
So that way we don't have to go through all of that in today's session, if
Sure.
that's appropriate.
Yeah, I was going to suggest that too, because
Yeah.
I was like, I don't know if because if you go to the email from Jody, and then you click on the link, it'll come up with the kind of the explanation, and then you can click through to the form, which will be helpful. And when I was looking through, I was like, gosh, we're only going to get one done, and maybe not enough.
No.
But you can go and get that information
Sure.
really pretty simply, I think, from the folks involved
Oh, yeah.
before
That's
the 31st.
easy.
Yeah, and I can send you, just to make it even faster, an email real quick,
Oh, I'll
just
pull it.
the link to the
Yeah,
form,
okay.
so that you don't have to go through the
Otherwise,
email.
I'll
I
pull
have
it
a
up.
question, Ken. We've finished phase 1 of our space needs analysis. Now, we've talked about potential next phases, like figuring out where the income would come, what we want to do. And it's a pretty major infrastructure project, which we'd never get to construction. But is there anything that putting that on the list can get us to another substantial set? Like where would the income come from? What do we qualify for?
I wrote it down.
Well, that's what I'm thinking.
So-
If it gets us another step closer, like reviewing what funds are available, or a physical thing saying, okay, now we can take a deeper dive into the space needs analysis we did. I don't know how you envision that working.
Yeah, it could be something that's on there. Admittedly, with the number of irons that we have in the fire right now, it's one that we haven't necessarily been able to take a deep dive into the analysis beyond the summary that was presented. And, so I don't have a clear answer I can provide at
But isn't
this
this through
point.
2022?
Mhm.
You said, it's good from 20. So if we put it on the list, we might not get to it till 2021
Yeah.
but at least that way we know if there's potential funding to take us that next step. Yeah, I don't expect that to be
Yeah.
done in the next 3 or 4 months. There's no way, because it is a big issue. But I'm looking for something that just moves us forward
Sure.
a little bit.
The only challenge that I have with that is because it's asking for more than, a project. We have to also have some meat to it on what we're asking for, as far as, are we asking to do a feasibility study, and what is that feasibility study going to accomplish, or what that next phase is. And that's why I'm struggling. I don't have an
I
answer
understand.
for that
I
next.
understand.
I mean,
what the
I
next
think
step
that it could be as simple as, essentially we're seeking funds to hire a developer to propose a redevelopment of the McMinnville County campus that empties buildings and then redevelops them. And obviously that would be a huge economic, let's see, that would meet the construct public works facilities to support economic recovery, create jobs in new existing industries in the downtown core.
And I guess, Casey, you could say too, it needs to better serve our citizens,
Mhm.
where they can go to one or two places
Sure.
instead of going to 8 or 9 different places to get service. I mean,
Right.
but I can't envision myself how that would work. I think it's a good idea, but what the next, and that's why I have to leave it up to Ken, what the next process of that, that
Mhm.
biting off that next little picture, and say whether it's hiring a consultant to take a deeper dive, and specifically look at some of those buildings that we have a real poor condition on. Maybe that's the order they can be done. I don't know, but
I was thinking, you probably appreciate this. It would be, you could do one that was like, hire or retain an architect or a redeveloper to create a plan that get the new building built without increasing taxes at all, right? Or just like do it like, here's what we want out of this scenario.
well, yeah, and even if it's the next step, we're not even to construction. Is there a step
Sure.
that we can get in there that has nothing to do with a bond levy, nothing to do with additional taxes, nothing? It just gets us one step closer to being where we need to be.
Right.
I'll take a look at that,
Yeah.
because the easy one would be, is getting an application ready to the state for work on the courthouse.
Oh yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Getting on
Yeah,
that
getting on
the
list
list.
for courthouse funds.
Well, yeah, because I can
Oh,
see
yeah.
of replacing capital improvement. We've had to do it for 15 years, replacing the windows, something that's really a capital project. And even if it's just to replace all the windows, so you go one side of the building, like today, you touch the south side of the building, you burn your hand.
Yeah.
You touch the north side,
Right.
and it's really cool.
Right.
So, it's.
If I may add something real quick, the other thing that I think makes this a really beneficial process for us to go through is that it helps to, in a broad way, set some priorities for the board that we
Yeah.
can track and manage ourselves. So I'm taking the information that comes out of this process and putting it in a sort of management or a spreadsheet that shows, yeah, these are the things that might well work for a regional or an EDA application. Here are the projects that have a COVID response element that might be reimbursable through the state or might have some other application. And then here are the other funding opportunities so that we can look at the whole life cycle of these different projects and not with respect to just this funding source. But if they're a priority, then we can look at the ways that we'll manage that funding long term.
Ken, I know it's been a year since you've had a conversation with Jeff Towery, since they made theirs. I have no idea what their space needs looks like. I don't have the faintest clue. But if there was, whether we shared or we didn't, would that be one of those that could be put in as a joint application? Because the city of Newburgh is looking, and maybe they already have, is looking at their space needs.
Mhm.
We're looking at our space needs. So could a potential option of, we're going to say, put in the application, to even say, if you stay separate, this is what it would look like. If you go together into like a local government center or something.
Sure.
We may never do that, but this is what it would look like. If we get the funding, then we can have multiple jurisdictions, put in I'll put it on the list. I don't know.
So I would, while we're talking about things on the list, I would second whatever the internet. I feel like you brought up the
Rural
internet.
broadband.
Yeah, the rural broadband. And that's one obviously where we can have as partners the hospital and healthcare systems and also the school districts, right? And I can envision that one as because the internet service providers already know where there are gaps. Having it be a collaboration between school districts, the internet service providers, and the county to make sure that those gaps are filled. And it seems like it would be a really great ask to the EDA because it's a public-private partnership. They're going to be putting, the ISPs are going to be putting effort into it. They're going to be doing the engineering. And then school kids get the benefit of it,
Yeah,
as
a lot
well
of
as, you know, entrepreneurs and
Yeah, the area out by you. the thing
businesses.
about it is, that's, a lot of that loop has already been engineered, so it's basically almost ready to go to
right.
construction. So I think that would be something, that fact that we have all the partners, the school districts sharing, the fact that we have a private partner. The fact is, a lot of the engineering has already been done, so.
So is that?
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead, Abhisha, no.
Yeah, thank you, excuse me. Chair, I think that's a good point, and I know Commissioner Wilson has continued to bring this up, is that for rural broadband, we really do have, in relation to COVID, 2 tracks. So there's distance learning and telehealth that are being focused on and also have some funding. And then, of course, there's that continued impact for just our agricultural community and rural communities. So when I think about putting this as a project on the list, I think that we can approach it a few different ways. So I think that expanding rural broadband in and of itself is something that can go on the list, right? We understand the need, trying to pinpoint the exact cost feels extremely nebulous at this point, but that's where the second approach comes in. We do have some engineered projects. Kathy and Tate at Online Northwest submitted for the state of Oregon Rural Broadband Program, which I think actually came through USDA to the state, and then she submitted 2 projects that are fully engineered, which means that they could get accomplished much sooner. And she is taking a focus, at least for these projects, on distance learning. So she was really trying to target areas where there were children that were attending a local school district but did not have access to broadband. So it was really difficult for them to do distance learning. She was working with the school district to get access to kind of those areas, those zip codes, if you will. That said, I am not aware of whether we have any other service providers who also have engineered projects. And where we do have those, I would love to get them on the list, so because they're just kind of easy to pull the trigger on in terms of funding. Yes, it's already engineered, it makes sense, all the information has already been gathered. Those are very easy to fund. So if I would like to see us put something more global on the list, expanding rural broadband to the whole county, and then some very focused projects around broadband. So if there are other engineered projects that you're aware of, please send those my way so that when I do the follow-up on that one, we can make sure that we get absolutely all of them on there.
Which is also why the relief nursery is a good thing to include, because it is something that has already been funded such a large portion that, a lot of these funds, when they come down, especially what we're gonna see for fall, likely around distance learning for the schools, a lot of those have a very short turnaround. So if they have a project timeline of 12 months, then these are the projects that we know that we would be able to deploy very quickly. Some of them just simply could not be pulled together in such a short period of time. So that will help us to make decisions later through different funding applications.
Right. And then there's the Newburgh. You were going to say something, but I just remember that there's the family place expansion in Newburgh as well.
Right, that's going on.
Yeah.
I was just thinking in terms of the West Valley and this one impediment that we've had to opening in the fall, which is not that far away, and that is the water issue. And that is the stumbling block, and we didn't have the money to complete that. Without that, the city and the fire department wouldn't sign off.
Yeah.
So here we have everything ready to go, and we can't pull the trigger. So I know, Mr. Chair, you had asked about Commissioner Pope's broadband, where they're at.
Yeah.
And basically, he's been working with Illyrica.
Okay.
Not familiar with that provider. And he says perhaps others. And currently, it's to cover all areas of Polk County that don't have broadband. And they have been identified in their GIS survey. They've already identified some of these areas. And but so far, Illyrica is the only ISP to return in a response. So they're saying if they had $1 million to invest before the end of the calendar year, they would be able to do this project. He says they're not going to do an RFP because they don't need to do an RFP, but they'll just direct fund at this point. And they're exempt from the competitive bidding situation. They'll do it basically as a pass-through grant. And So that's where they are. He says Online Northwest has been given the same opportunity, but they've not presented any plan to them.
Okay.
So that's where they are
I'm
in
smiling through my mask.
Polk County.
Yeah, that is
Okay,
pri-
great. Thank you very much.
Yeah, that is private online now, because they're really focusing more on Yamhill County right now. So no doubt someday there'll be in all the counties. It's a pretty big company. But the fact that they didn't do it, but the fact that they have two in Yamhill County
Mhm.
that are engineered and ready to go, that's maybe the ones they're focusing on right now too, so. But I've heard of
Yeah.
America, but not that much. They're not a
I think there are
common,
4.
they're not a common one in the northwest part of the state, so.
And then I know that Superintendent Morlock at least has identified in the Newburgh School District the places where there are gaps too.
Yeah.
So, but that's very helpful. Thank you.
But I like Abishai's idea of
Mhm.
basically
Oh, yeah.
2 different things on this. One more of a global, and then one specifically with economic development, health, or healthcare and COVID response. I like doing it that way.
And the other thing is, you know, with telecommuting and people who have no option but to work from home, and, you know, I know where I live, there is no internet. So there are
Right.
people who don't even have that option and are doing things like going to someone else's house or getting an
Parking
office in a neighboring city.
Yeah.
There's just no other option.
Well, if you didn't have
That's
all
a good
those
point.
trees, you could have a satellite dish.
Cut the trees down.
That's right. Cut those trees down.
And you're right that there, you know, in some places there are options, but they're end up being quite expensive, and they're limited on, you know, you can download all you want, but you can't upload or whatever.
Right.
So I think you're right that there are so many there's so many employees, and then on top of that, there's so many budding entrepreneurs who really could who need better internet in their communities or their area. Yeah, I know that even here, if you go out on Baker Creek Road from McMinnville, as you get further and further out, you get poorer and poorer and poorer, and they're right, you know, essentially right on the edge of town.
Mhm.
So that area has been identified as well by Online Northwest.
Okay, good.
The one thing I wanted to add, another thing to the to a possible list, and I'm not sure, maybe you can help me with it. It goes along with the relief nursery, which is that if we have, so there's a chronic lack of childcare, and then if we have a hybrid model for schools in the fall, there's going to be a time when parents need to be working and children need to have some kind of care. I'm not sure. I know that Jen Richter at the Early Learning Hub
Mhm.
has offered to help us identify what the most effective place to put funding would be, and it's good because I don't have any knowledge of the terrain, but it seems like that's a place where an infusion of money would be really helpful. Do you have any insights into
Well,
that?
I would just bring Suey into the conversation
yes.
in terms of Head Start
Yeah.
and the capacity there, which they, you know, obviously can only do what they can do.
Yeah.
So I think Head Start's going to be important, and absolutely the Early Learning Hub through the CCO.
And I'm not sure what that, you know, necessarily what that looks like, but I know that a lot of parents are going to be struggling in the fall,
Sure,
kind of no matter what the fall school year looks like.
either way,
Yeah.
right.
If I can propose in terms of approaching this potential project, we could reach out to your contacts at Head Start and the Early Learning Hub and see if there is already some concept of a project that the county could then sponsor as a partner to just get on the list.
Right.
Without some sort of framework, we would really, I'm not gonna say struggle, but it would just be
Yes.
a less convincing
Totally.
list item. So maybe that's a good start. And then,
Mhm.
like I said, if we can identify a project and the county says, yes, we think this is a good idea. That's what I mean in terms of sponsorship, then we can get it on
Yeah.
there.
And I'll reach out I'm offering to do that because I don't want to volunteer you. but
Either way, I mean,
I was thinking about Commissioner Pope has worked a lot on trying to identify places where there's workplace childcare. Like that's been kind of one of his things over time.
right.
And so maybe we can find out from him if he has a
Template.
plan, a template that we could drop in.
Yeah, he's talked about that a lot.
Yeah. Okay.
So do you want, are you going to contact Commissioner Pope or about that? Or do you want me,
I
it's up to
certainly
you?
can.
Okay,
You're gonna,
it's up to you. I
okay.
can, I can if you,
If you would like to, that'd be great.
okay, I will contact him and ask him
You're
what
like,
he
I've
has
got
in,
another thing for you.
in the hopper. And what about Suey and Jen?
I for sure, I've never actually met Sui. I have her
Oh.
email address, but I for sure I'll reach out to Jen right there.
Okay, I'll get a hold of Suey.
Okay, great.
And to
If you
whatever
need
extent,
backup,
as we start doing that,
That's right, because you have a history
For
with
sure.
Suey and Head Start.
Yeah, so I will connect both of you with Jen Richter when I reach out to her. And she has expressed she's just kind of waiting for a call, as it were. Okay. The one other, I want to make sure that Newburgh Bendy bypass is on there. Okay.
I have it on here, and I
Okay.
just want to make sure that that is something that we want to put
I mean,
on
we
there.
pay a lot of money for a lobbyist, so I feel like we have invested our money in this project.
It seems
should
to me
probably
there's
be.
enough information to say this next something needs to get funded. I guess the question is, who wants to identify what this next something is? Is it a further analysis? Is it a build out?
Probably the best one would be, I think, Dave Hogbert
Mhm.
and myself, because right now they're doing the engineer or the initial design for the Dayton to Dundee piece. Because ODOT just happened to find the money, but other than the initial design. So there's that piece, there's a piece between Newburgh, so I think it would pretty well be identified. And especially since they're looking, federal government for the Transportation Act, your infrastructure is always looking for matching funds. And if this could qualify as a matching fund for what we get from the federal government, that could go a long way.
Oh, rather than having to do the same thing that the county did with all the partners of like,
With all
okay,
the
we'll
partners.
put in this amount of money, we'll
Yes.
put in
Yeah.
that. Nice.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yes.
yeah, I think the bypass would be very good. I will,
Is that specifically for phase 2? Is
Well,
that for,
it's actually could be for phase 2 engineering, which is almost done, or it can be for phase 3 design,
Mhm.
which they've started on now. So
Right.
we have the option of what we wanna put to. My feeling is that we probably put it to, since David Evans Associates is almost done with the engineering on phase 2, I guess my thing would be to identify, and this is without talking to Dave, probably phase 3 design. Because phase 3 is gonna take some environmental work. Phase 2 doesn't take any more, but phase 3 will take some environmental work and the phase 2 that's all done. on phase
because I'm
2.
just wondering if phase 2 is, the funding is completely allocated for the construction of phase 2.
Oh, no, it won't, because then that's waiting.
And that's where I was kind of going towards economic recovery and having that immediate impact by the timeline that's in here. It might be good the funding for the construction of phase 2 might be,
That would probably to me, Ken, that would be the preferable, especially until ODOT decides that that's a priority, which they haven't yet, and it's not shovel ready. We can't apply to the federal government for funding. So it's ODOT recognizing that it's shovel ready.
So Commissioner, if I can be so bold, I would suggest that we put them both on the list. If we know that we need funding for construction of phase 2, which in terms of economic recovery, construction is looked pretty highly at, right? So you're creating jobs, or at least retaining jobs, just by making a thing. So construction is generally, people want to fund a thing, the building of a thing. And then to put phase 3 design in there, and then at some point we prioritize.
Yeah, and
But to at least have them both in there, I think is
I
valuable.
think phase 2 construction would be.
And can you be our contact person for that?
Who?
You can.
Yeah, Dave,
I can't hear you.
myself and I will.
To help us understand what
Yeah,
that
put
looks
me
like.
down.
Yeah.
Put me down.
Great.
I'd be happy to talk to Dave too.
Yeah, I talked to him the other day, and I was trying to figure out in my notes the thing that he was calling for. Like, if you're going to talk about something, talk about this. And I haven't found
He
it so
tends
far.
to be the contact person for a lot of things.
Yeah,
Well,
and
and
a lot of
this with
things
the
in the city,
Parkway
yeah.
Committee is directly involved with this, so.
Is
Yeah.
this Dave Martin?
Is what?
Dave who?
Audenberg.
So are you going
I'll
to,
make contact with
Okay.
Dave,
okay, great.
and then I can always put them through to Avashon.
And so the last thing that I want to make sure that we bring up, because it's kind of along the lines of what you talked about putting together kind of a priority list, is the West Side Road Bicycle Improvement Project, which is part of our TSP, our Transportation System Plan to, for Nicole's benefit, Transportation System Plan. And the reason why I bring that one up is that while we've talked about the Federal Lands Access Program funds, this exercise now is get projects out there, not like, hey, we're identifying specific funds. And that one has the nexus of improving the seismic capabilities of the bridges on West Side Road, which is one of our most heavily traveled county roads. The transportation system plan calls for bike lanes that are, separated, safe bike lanes. And then it also, that road currently needs to be overlaid, the whole thing, because of how much traffic is on the road. But then also part of it is that the Bureau of Land Management is in the middle of improving the bicycle infrastructure. Forget what the project is called, but on the Nestucca access, essentially from where our county road ends almost all the way into Tillamook, right? Over Meadow Lake Road, yeah, exactly.
All the way to Blaine, or I think it's all the way to 101 at Beaver. I think.
Yes. And so that one, there is federal funding, and Brian Worley at AOC has been helping with that. But I want to make sure that, in case we only get part of it from the Federal Lands Access Program, that it's something that is still out there. And part of it is that as we've seen with the road, Highway 47 through Yamhill and Carlton, as they work on that, we're going to see more traffic ultimately on West Side Road. So having West Side Road safer is going to be a big benefit, as well as the bridge component. Sorry.
So how much of that, is it 1%, is it 3% of is it the gas taxes that are going to bike paths? How much of that are we going to devote to that project, or is it?
There is not an intention unless there's a need for a match. The Federal Lands Access Program has various levels of local government matches. And the way that Brian Worley has explained it is that this particular project wouldn't require a match because of the number of communities. There'd be 3 communities that are impacted by it or improved. And because of the size of the project that the BLM is doing. So in that respect, if it was through the Federal Lands Access Program, there wouldn't be a local match. It's just that we might not get enough money to improve all of West Side Road. So,
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
But the Public Works Department has, they got confirmation that they had been in the habit of spending all of the money every year because they thought that that's how we had to do it. They learned that we can save up the money to do a project that's, because $45,000 is not a lot when you're talking about roads.
The driveway.
Yeah, exactly. They built a footbridge, on Hill Road. So with saving up the money, if there needs to be a match, saving up the money will certainly help with that.
Okay, thank you for that.
There are a couple of other projects that I'd like to offer for consideration, or I've kind of heard others mention in the region too. Is now a good time to share some of those thoughts?
Yes.
So one of those projects is the hotel sheltering project. And
Yes.
Carrie mentioned this the other day in terms of something that she thought the county was probably still really keeping their eye on. I'm not sure where that program is currently. I know YCAP has been running a program, there's been funding. I'm not sure in terms of future look, what the need and funding might look like for that. Is there a project there that needs to be considered?
It's a good question.
Yeah, going forward, we didn't have anything earmarked because
Yeah.
what were the funds were supposed to actually run out?
I think they have enough through the end of August now.
Yeah,
Yeah,
okay, so July.
YCAP moved another round of funding over to it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So is that project run completely through YCAP for the county right now?
Yeah, at this point.
And that's something that we feel needs to continue to be expanded and funded, and there's probably a project there.
It's been successful.
It has, I think we can put it on the list.
Yeah.
And then see if maybe Alexandra can sort of flesh out the form to let us know how far we can
Do you
go.
want me to reach out to her?
If I
about that?
can,
Or, okay.
I can reach out to
Okay,
her.
that'd be great. Thank you. I know that she's applying for 2 different fund streams right now for it
Okay.
because she really wanted, I talked to her on the phone the other day. She's like, it has been so successful that I want it to keep going.
Sure.
So maybe that's,
And potentially if they have a
Between-
vision for something where this is more of a long-term sort of a program, that might be a great thing to put on this list.
Yeah.
In comparison to just expanding a short-term project, if this is a long-term benefit, something that they're saying, hey, this works, and we'd like to see this become something more meaningful. So I have Commissioner stare it down as our follow-up for that one. Another project, and this is something that I've mentioned to Ken and a few others in the region, is that many of you are probably aware of the fact that 501c6 nonprofit organizations have not had access to any funding through federal or state recovery efforts, be that grants or loans. SEDCOR is a 501c6 organization, so are all of our chambers and the majority of our downtown associations. We are seeing that chambers in the region are really suffering while they're probably working harder than they ever have and serving a need that's greater than any of us have ever seen in our lives for our business community. They are also losing memberships. Their members, even if they're still keeping their doors open, are having to prioritize where they put their money. We know that our chambers have been serving businesses who are not members very openly. They've been exchanging information, partnering to identify funding for the region. I mean, really going above and beyond. My concern about long-term recovery is potential lack of funding for these C6 organizations who are direct business support. So through member attrition, loss of revenue from events, and concern about what revenue might look like from video lottery funds, there is a concern about how do we long-term support these organizations who provide boots on the ground work for our business community.
Right.
So I'm currently putting together a project for business recovery support for C6 organizations in the region. So Jason Schneider in Marion County and I are developing a program of what that recovery effort might look like. Now is a really good pivot time to say our businesses need us now instead of what we were doing, which was moment to moment, hour to hour updates on regulation and what do they need to be doing, to now saying, how do we help you pivot your business and stay viable, right, into the future. And those efforts look very different than that other type of work. So we are trying to put together a program that we might be able to put in front of some organizations for funding. I'm also encouraging the individual counties to look at that and say, do we have a project here to say, if we want to support this work in our county, how do we do that? What does that look like? And is that the county asking for funding from EDA or the state or someone else, and then saying we want to contract with those service providers to ensure that they have enough revenue to keep themselves staffed?
Right.
And also ensure that businesses are successful? Or is this we want to offer a grant program to these C6 organizations? And that really isn't an open-ended thing, but I would be remiss not to share the pressure that these organizations are feeling and remind all of us that these are the organizations that are going to help our businesses. And when it comes to economic recovery, we need jobs for people to go back to. We all know that, right? We need jobs for people to go back to. We need our tax base. This is what economic development is. And they are under a lot of pressure right now. We know that chambers are starting to lay off staff. And they are projecting, many of them are projecting, even in the next 12 to 18 months, budgets that they cannot sustain.
I think this whole thing about funding C6, especially the chambers and the downtown associations, and not fund them because the lot is terrible, because they're the ones that are doing the reach out, they're the ones that are working with their members, they're the ones that they can get no funds.
I want to make sure that Okay.
And I just wanted to take a minute, and I just wanted to expand on what Avishai was saying, and I just want to highlight, we're expecting to see a downturn or, an impact to our video lottery funds, which goes into Fund 26, is what we've historically used for some of these memberships, but also for the grant programs, for the strategic investment grants, and also our contract with SEDCOR to provide economic development services. And I think a lot of these areas, and I just wanted to pencil out, because I'm anticipating, the state was already anticipating around 11% drop in video lottery revenues. I think it's going to be more than that. And so looking at that impact is one of the projects I was going to put out there is an expansion of, whether it's a grant program through our economic development funds, as a project, and maybe we can get outside funding sources to come in and replace that. I want to be careful. I'm not calling it, we're not looking to replace revenue. I'm looking at a way to support programs that we have in the economic development funds that we currently don't have the revenue to support. And one of those could be the 501 support for that economic recovery. It could be direct, maybe increasing the amount of funds that we have available through our strategic investment funds, that instead of necessarily looking at startup or some of the new businesses, we're looking at, businesses impacted by COVID, recovery, reopening their doors, changing the focus of the program there in Fund 26. So I'm thinking that as a project, it would be, more of a comprehensive economic recovery plan or package that's available for the county through our Fund 26.
And that's available to C6s.
Correct.
To partner or apply for.
So I thought, because
I think
it could have multiple, we're supporting the organizations that are helping to support the local businesses and advocating and everything that they're doing with recovery, but then also even asking for additional funds to even beef up for direct business grants for recovery.
Yeah.
And just as a reminder, while most grants are not available for C6s, the county grant programs did not ever exclude the 501c3s or 6s. So that was something we did have applications from. So.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I noted that when I looked through the program. Well, I would support something like that. I'm realizing when I realized the way that the governor set up the economic response teams with there's the government side of it and there's the business side of it, and then there's the ERT, that all these chambers were involved in response and recovery, but they don't get any funding. So, the governor's office essentially, and me being on the ERT, we were asking chambers to do things, and we weren't providing them with any funding to help with that.
And in our county, we have, so SEDCOR as a contract service provider, we have NEDP here in McMinnville, the McMinnville Chamber of Commerce, the Chehalis Valley Chamber of Commerce, and then a very newly formed Chamber of Commerce out in Sheridan.
I was just going to ask you if that was
And then several downtown associations that are all structured differently. Some have staff, some don't, some are kind of volunteer based. And I would say that SEDCOR has never had as deep of a relationship with NEDP and both of the larger chambers, so McMinnville and Chehalis, as we do now. And really that was us saying, this is big work. We always have worked together, but this is big work that we're stronger together on. And so recognizing the needs of these partners, it sits really high on the list for SEDCOR. Of course, ensuring the county is in a position to fund all of these economic development projects is important. But the amount of engagement that these chambers have had with our businesses, with the county, with each other throughout this whole pandemic has been nothing short of impressive. I mean, extremely impressive.
Yeah, I agree.
Agreed.
So if you have that consensus, I think it would be good for Ken and I to work on putting something together if that is appropriate.
Agreed.
Yes, please.
Okay.
Ken's not doing anything else.
That's what I was just thinking. The point person in this shall be Ken.
Yeah, I'll shoot you a starting point. So you can just,
Well, and I think some of this, I think it'll be pretty easy to just base it on some of our existing programs that we've already had in place, and just we're looking at expanding it with more of a focus on the economic recovery
Yeah.
post, so.
yeah, thank you. I also think that there might be an opportunity for workforce pilot program, and I'd like to work with Willamette Workforce Partnership on developing a better understanding of what that looks like from their perspective.
Okay.
So that's the pivot of workforce from maybe industries that where they don't see they have a future to industries where maybe they do see they have a future. We do have an issue right now where we have our manufacturing industry who is still thriving and trying very hard to grow. And it's been extremely difficult to find staff, which is always upsetting when you have an unemployment rate as high as we have had these last several months. Certainly there are reasons for that we haven't seen before. So with respect to that, there's still this issue. And how do we resolve that? So I know that our workforce partners are working on programs and projects going forward. I don't have anything to present to you. I just wanted you to be aware of that and to understand that there's a regional impact to this kind of workforce anomaly that we're seeing right now. And there could potentially be a project that comes forward.
I can tell you, with WWP and talking to Kim and staff over there, they'll be the first to agree between WWP and Centcor and COG. There's never been such a strong working relationship. I mean, WP, there's always been that relationship. WWP did their stuff and Centcor did their stuff and COG did their stuff. And to see them all working together now is just a tremendous change. And it's going to do nothing but bring good. So,
That sounds great to me.
yeah.
I think it's very important to make sure that we have people for the industries that are thriving and that seem stable long term.
Well, that's only 10 or 12. Well,
One other one that I wondered if you're interested in is co-worker sewer district. The project that won't go away.
So I think we're at, there was money set aside for a master plan, right?
Yes.
Okay. So then it would really be for implementing the master plan. And one thing that I've heard both Russ Heath and Mark Lago talk about is the idea of essentially getting all of the infrastructure up to date and then moving the ownership line to the other side of the tank, essentially, so that each household who's a customer owns the tank and the pump, and the county just takes care of essentially the lift station and the drain field. So getting that, I mean, that's a great project in terms of its rural redevelopment and development and improving infrastructure. It also helps rural folks who they're never going to be able to afford on their own to upgrade this kind of infrastructure. And it helps reduce the amount of work that the county does in the future considerably.
Yeah, I do think some.
I mean, they act as plumbers.
I think some of the residents of Cove Orchard would really balk at the idea that they own from the tank.
Yeah,
Right. It's going to be a big political issue,
sure.
but in all reality, we should own the pump station, the drain fields, and everything. And we do the one, as you said, we do the one side, they do the other side, and thus we're going to have a full sewage system up there.
Right. Yeah, I mean, that seems like the best case scenario is to have everything start out fresh and healthy and uncracked and unsettled, because there's a lot of tanks are settling because it's weird soil there and pipes are separating.
Yeah, that's had a long history of, a long storied
Yep.
history of us trying to figure out how to
Yeah.
deal with that.
So that's the latest, kind of vision of it, but hopefully the master plan will help crystallize more clearly.
Is that slated for next fiscal year?
I believe, yeah, there's funds budgeted for this
Funds,
year.
but yeah,
For
for
this
this fiscal
current
year.
Oh,
So,
And I can, as a starting point, I can check with Mark Lago and Russ Heath about, do they anticipate that they'll have something to work on between now and September of 2022?
Because they're also working on additional funds possibly from special districts.
Yes. Okay, anything else, commissioners or staff?
I mean, that's a good,
anything?
that's a real good start.
Commissioner Starrett
I'm
has a-
just wondering, and this is really one of those projects that's been a real struggle over the years, and that's the Newburgh Sportsman Air Park.
Oh,
And we've really had some issues trying, even with our congressional delegation,
yeah.
everybody has had a hard time getting the FAA to respond to what we need to move forward. And basically, in a nutshell, and it's a very complicated process, but the owners of the air park are basically saying, going forward, they would like a sponsor. And they would like the county to be a sponsor because the airport needs runway upgrades and various things that are just prohibitive for them.
Mhm.
But as an economic development driver, and especially since the Allison is in, I mean, pre-COVID,
Yeah.
it was one of those places that could really, I mean, we do need another airport. And when they're not building anymore, and there's not going to be another option to have one.
Yeah.
So here we have someone who's getting older, who's trying to figure out, how do I keep this air park going? And we've not had any luck getting much response from the FAA. We continue to work, and we've got people working on it, but just wanted to see if we could just put that down as far as one of the things where if we could put it on there. I mean, it's got so many implications. You've got the emergency.
Oh, it does, absolutely.
That's just another area where you could, if you needed to fly in, fly out, whether it's Cascadia, whatever, and for business too. So if we could
And we
put
have a
that,
project we're working on that that's close in proximity. So it would be
yeah.
really helpful to have a functioning air park.
So I mean, if we could put that down, and I could get the form to you. I mean, in whatever.
That'd be great. And I can follow up with Doug Rex in the city of Newburgh as well. I sit on their EOA, Economic Opportunity Analysis team, on their technical advisory committee, all these acronyms, the EOA, TAC, as they're looking at identifying what their needs are in terms of land and potential expansion. And some of the only available property in Newburgh is actually around the air park.
Mhm.
So I know that there has been some conversation about how to support the air park. So I would be happy to follow up with you, and then also Doug Rex, to see what could be put together, if anything.
Yeah, and I would just say that I know that there's been some pushback over the years from the city because it's just not something they wanted to take on. It's
Right.
complicated, but that the sponsor wouldn't be the city because they don't appear to be interested, but that it would be the county. We haven't decided that as a body, but that doesn't seem like it's the next step. The next step is seeing, where we could at least get some movement. So I know the city's sort of been pushing back on being the entity that moves this forward.
Okay.
Well, it's years ago, if you remember back when they first started designing the bypass, phase one of the bypass, it was the FAA who requested them to realign the bypass at the air park because the FAA requirements. They said, well, if it ever changes, we have to have, that's why it's so sunken.
Okay.
Yeah, and that was done, the FFA is the one that required that. So, well, if they require that, they should take a more of an interest. I think Newberg, I'm not so sure. And of course, I don't think that Minville will ever change. I wish it would. But I would like to see myself, this is just my personal thing, like the Yamhill County Port Authority. So like Hillsborough has their port authority and Dallas have their port authority. Because if we had a port authority, then both airports would be run by the port authority. So they manage both airports. I mean, the guys still may own it, but they manage
Mm-hmm.
the airports because I know a lot of people are flying to Newberg for business and they fly to McMinnville and drive to Newburgh. Well, if Newburgh was in better shape, they could fly right into Newburgh.
Right.
So
Well,
nice
I think
nice
it'd be
little
great
airport.
to add
It
it
is.
as a starting point. I think that would be good to
Yeah,
add
Put it
that to
on
the
the
list
list.
of
Okay.
project
There's
requests.
no real.
And then for
commitment.
sure, let's keep talking about it.
Okay, thank
There's no
you.
real commitment at this point to making those decisions. It's just saying,
Right.
we care about this.
Yeah,
Excellent.
And we do.
Mhm.
Is there a project around the fairgrounds? I know they have a desire to do a master plan because they have a gazillion things
Mhm.
to conceptualize and sort of phase and not $1
Mhm.
for that, so
Right.
that's another.
Did Gary budget for a master plan this year, do you know? And sad part about it is it's not a fairgrounds, it's an event center.
Right.
If you look at all this, I mean, they're still doing events there. They have to maintain the social distancing and everything. But with the cut of the governor's fund, and now I'd say they're estimating 11% cut in their lottery funds. And the Oregon Fair Board Association has been actually begging for more funds. Chances are all the small county fairgrounds
Mhm.
are probably going to take a $50,000 to $75,000 cut. So, and that is an economic driver. Our event center, our fairgrounds, our event center is a huge economic driver for McMinnville. The events they have there, almost pre-COVID,
Mhm.
they had big West Coast and national events every
Equestrian
week
stuff.
Mhm.
that brought in people from all over. So,
Yeah, they also can, it would be a great opportunity to reconceptualize their income stream and
Yeah.
their revenue capabilities and not being so reliant on, the standard sort of event model, because obviously that's budget as evidence, so.
and you really
Yeah.
want to get to where the event center is really self-paying. That's what you want to get to, but you got to get certain things done to get it to the point where it's self-paying.
I think the biggest thing for the fairgrounds is going to be that master plan
I do
with the focus on capital, and facility improvements. A lot of those facilities are really old and dated, and that's going to probably be their biggest.
And they're doing a good job of holding it together, but that's all they're doing is holding it together and putting lipstick on the pig, you might say. And that's all they're doing. Looks nice, but
But so what would that look like then in terms of put down on a form? Because if they're waiting on the master plan, would it just be
I think
facilities
I think
improvements?
it would be doing the master.
Oh, it
plan.
would be doing the master plan. Okay, that's right,
I
because they
think
don't
it'd
have
be-
the funding for
I
it.
think it'd be a long-term master plan and strategic plan for the fairgrounds.
Okay, perfect.
I think it's an opportunity assessment too, which speaks to the UDA funding. So some sort of an opportunity kind of learning, right? What are the opportunities of that facility than a master plan, which might ultimately have some costs
Yeah.
attached for improvements, but funding the opportunity analysis in the master plan seems to fit well.
Mhm.
And I'm happy to talk to Gary. I've had many conversations with them about sort of all the lists and things that they would like to do.
and I think if we had a professional that came to work with Gary area and did the actual master plan, because Gary does a great job of running things. There's other stuff that needs to be done out there that may be a little bit above Gary, like a master. Gary kind of conceptually knows what he wants. For a master plan, all those things may not necessarily work. So that's why I think we need somebody to come in and do a master plan.
Okay. So we have all of our homework
Yeah, would you mind if I go back for real quick and just make
Please,
sure I have?
yeah,
this
I know,
right?
that,
Okay.
I've got a list that hopefully matches
You
yours.
mean you're not gonna do a nice typed up list? and
I
say
will,
here's
I
all the
absolutely will. Yeah, once I get home. So I'm hearing Commissioner Sterrett mention water projects, so West Valley, Willamina, kind of checking in on what they have. I'm also aware of projects in Lafayette and Amity, so I'll do some follow-up directly with those individual communities and the Council of Governments to see where we're at and what is getting on that list. The next one is I'm hearing the transportation. So what could that look like, expanding service? And I believe Commissioner Olson, or would you be our contact person for that
And that's
conversation?
transit.
Transit, that's
Transit,
right.
thank you, transit, yes, what did I say, transportation?
Yeah.
And along those lines, there, Cynthia and I talked about that she's working on. I think it sounds like she talked to Ken about this, but about how to make something similar to Uber that matches with their existing setup. So I'm not sure whether that would be
That would
the
be part of it.
opportunity,
We've
but-
had that,
okay.
Cynthia and I've had that conversation too.
We can work
So that might be the opportunity to slip that in.
Yeah, broadband is a big one. We're talking about kind of the global county expansion of rural broadband and then some project-specific items to get on that list. And so I have Carrie and I listed to kick that off because we already have so much information that we can pull from. However, I'm certain there's an opportunity to reconnect with you, Commissioner Olson, on some ideas that you have, and potentially Commissioner Sterrett following up with some work that you had made connection with Commissioner Pope out in Polk County. So we'll let you know if we need to draw some additional information to get some stuff initially populated. I have the Cove Orchard Sewer Project, which sounds like Carrie and potentially Chair Kula might be a connection to follow up to get that populated.
Yeah.
The Relief Nursery, Commissioner Sterrett, you'd be the contact person for that. That's the Willamina Relief Nursery.
And so Abhishek, just to be clear, so you want me to send you a completed form for each of the areas I've asked to?
So I think the way this will work is that Carrie and I will divide up this list and we will reach out to you and work with you to populate the form.
So you don't want me to send you stuff?
Yeah, you don't need to send us anything. We will follow up with
Yeah,
you. So
make sure.
the work is on our shoulders, unless you want to send us something, but just to make it easy and clear and
So I'll wait to hear from you, but I
Yes.
will get everything lined up for each of these 5 things I'm going to be doing.
yes, thank you.
Okay.
The fairgrounds, master plan, opportunity analysis, that will be Carrie mostly following up on that, probably connecting with Commissioner Olson. Sounds like you had direct conversations, is that right? Is that appropriate? Okay.
At least for the next 5 months or 4 or 5 months.
The bypass, we have a phase 2 engineering and construction, probably focused on construction, and phase 3 design. And it sounds like Commissioner
Yeah,
Olson,
well,
you're the lead on that as well?
Right, I'll be a contact on that one.
There was one around county campus. I was gonna say expansion, but maybe it's not. Is there a county campus sort of conversation?
Yeah,
So Ken, I have you down.
I'll see if I can flush that out.
Perfect, okay. Childcare programming. So this one, we have Commissioner Sterrett and Chair
Right,
Kula.
we'll get both get information.
And you're tag teaming, so that's following up with Commissioner Pope on groundwork that they've done, early learning hub and Head Start. So that's stuff where you can follow up with them in advance, and then when Carrie and I reach out to you, we'll draw in that information.
Perfect.
We will be having these interactions with you before the 31st. So that's in the next day or so, and you can
Yes.
start gathering this information. That'd be yeah. So the next one is the Newberg Sportsman Air Park. I will follow up with you, Commissioner Sterrett, on that one, and then also the city, just to see what we can pull together in terms of getting this on the list. I have the West Side Road Bicycle Improvement Project, and that sounds like it's a Chair Kula
Yeah.
follow-up. Okay. The Sheltering Project, current partner being YCAP, and it sounds like Commissioner Sterrett. That's a follow-up for you. Okay.
Thank you.
We then have the, I think I'm calling it Fund 24 project. 26, I can't even read my own writing, thank you. The Fund 26, so that's the
We'll just call it
economic recovery.
development.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So I'll follow up with you on that one, Ken.
Yep.
That was all that I had on the list. Did I catch them all? And then I have one update before y'all dismiss me, but did I
You had
catch all
the
projects?
workforce training, but that was going to be your
Yeah,
thing.
that is more of a
Yeah.
heads up to you. I'm not sure what that'll look like, but I know there will be things coming out of that.
That's everything I have on my list too, so they match.
I think there's a good list.
Okay, good. Well, before you dismiss me and move on to other very important things, I wanted to give you another update. So as you recall, many months ago, we were sitting here while I was at home watching you and talking about an economic recovery. It was called the Immediate Relief Grant Program that the county ended up standing up for $250,000. And I had shared with you then that by doing that, we would have an opportunity to leverage those funds, to bring more funds to our region.
Right.
So I did put together a grant project, a request, in partnership with Jason Schneider out of Marion County, and we put together a regional ask. And we put that ask out 3 different times for funding from the state. And the first round of funding was a little disappointing, to be honest. We received $45,000. The second round was a little more exciting at about $300,000. And at the same time, SEDCOR partnered with the Council of Governments and Willamette Workforce Partnership to get a foundation investment into this regional effort. And we were granted $50,000 by OCF. We just received, the second round from Business Oregon was like closer to 400,000, I can't remember. But we just received from the third ask from the state, $684,500 for this regional effort. So to date, we have been able to gather $1,141,500 for business direct grants to this 3-county region. And what we used to leverage those dollars was the grant program issued by Yamhill County at $250,000 and the grant program issued by Marion County at $800,000+. It's a random number. I can't remember the whole thing, but so we were able to bring in just over what our match was essentially for this region. And we continue to put that out in front of other funders.
Right.
And I know there's opportunities to try to leverage those funds again. So I just wanted to make sure that you were aware of the impact that these funds have had. I want, of course, for you to be aware of the work that we're trying to do to bring more resources to the area. And then again, just thank you for committing those funds early on when we really didn't know if you would get reimbursed, where it was going to come from, budgeting, really amidst a budget cycle, and everyone was trying to do the right thing and also make sure that they were being fiscally responsible. So I just want to say thank you from SEDCOR's perspective, from the business perspective of our partners in the community, to say that by doing that and getting in early, you helped us bring even more funds to this region. So thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Hooray. Thanks for all of your work on that.
Well, the bypass thing, if you look at what all the locals put in the phase 1 of the bypass, I'm a firm believer that if we would not have had that local match, phase 1 would not be built today. So, because it brought in a lot of additional money to build that.
The
So
reality is that every funder is looking for a demonstration of community support.
Sure.
that's right. That's what it comes
They
down
always
to.
ask for it, and money is the easiest way to demonstrate that people are completely bought into a project. So it really does speak.
Yeah, it's pretty exciting. So thank you.
Well,
Well,
thanks,
great. Thank you,
Abhishek.
Abhishek.
Thank you both. Appreciate it.
Now you have to go.
I know. I
home
wanted
and
to
do some-
clap too. Yeah, you've got a lot of work. Thanks for giving us homework too, by the way.
Thank you.
Yeah, that was great. It was
You're
always wonderful seeing you.
You're welcome. I'll follow up with
Yes.
an email that summarizes this information and next steps, and then Carrie and I will divvy it up and be in touch.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Carrie Ann.
Nice
It's lovely to
to meet
see you.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Caroline.
Abhishek. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Well, Commissioners, we'll move on to item 2, which is other business as necessary. Any other business?
Not for this work session, I know.
No,
Okay,
Mr.
that's
Chair.
good. Well, then I will adjourn this meeting. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you for asking, though.
Thanks for putting this together.
I was like, I
Tammy.
hope she doesn't say yes.
Yeah, I hope you